Well, hello to all. Thank you for being here. I would like to start welcoming and thanking the presence of João and Alex and also Sergio to this talk that we're having on this program. Just to give you some context about the program that we're talking about. The name is Mind the Tourism, Mind Your Footprint, Mind Your Health. And it is an innovation program by Nest in partnership with Planeteers and Universidade Nova. And it aims to map opportunities for innovation in tourism and also to promote sustainable-based technological solutions ready to test in the market. We want to bring together several stakeholders around sustainable innovation, such as startups, SMEs, university students, of course, corporate professionals, and work as major tourism opportunities within three vectors, working on sustainability technology, safety and security, and another one on health and well-being. And this talk is particularly important as it connects carbon understanding and the measurements of the planned sustainable innovations to reverse the global warming. So it is quite important and quite the core of Nest sessions that we want to develop. So this is quite important for us. I will just pass it to Sergio.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I'd like to also thank Alex and João for being here to discuss such important topics. And just as a reminder, it's the third of a series of 6 sustainability talks. Today, we like to talk about carbon footprint. We would like to explain first how to understand it in an easy way. Then we'll present what was entitled the most comprehensive plan to reverse carbon emissions. Because the European Commission has raised the bar for 2030 by settling an impressive decarbonization target of 55% compared to the 1990 levels. A couple of weeks ago, Bill Gates presented also an important book entitled How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, in which he says that we need to change dramatically our economy and scale up a whole set of disruptive innovations to get to nothing less than a net zero emission until 2050. To talk to us, we have speakers with different backgrounds, but that have in common the commitment to use science in service of sustainable development and decarbonization. To start, I'd like to introduce Alexandre Magnin, who is a sustainability advisor and illustrator who makes complex sustainability concepts easy to understand with drawings. Trained as a civil engineer, he worked in a marketing and communication company for 6 years before graduating in 2007 from the Masters in Strategic Leadership towards Sustainability in Sweden, in order to turn also the focus of his work to sustainability. His advanced studies in system thinking and science-based advanced knowledge that will be explained right away took him to Canada to work for 7 years as a sustainability strategy consultant at Natural Step. It's the NGO that has been co-leading important coalitions with the government, multinationals, and other non-profit to tackle large sustainable transitions efforts in themes like energy futures, circular economy, or natural capital. As a strategic sustainability consultant, Alex worked on projects with various industries, insurance, aerospace engineering, films, and municipalities. Now focused on communication and illustrated, he created his own YouTube channel called Sustainability Illustrated that contains dozens of short illustrated videos that simplify concepts of sustainability. One of his most recent videos is precisely entitled Carbon Footprint, which is very coherent with what we'll be discussing today, and how to calculate and reduce it, very practical topics. And just as a side note, by the way, we made a partnership with Sustainability Illustrated to translate to Portuguese and increase the reach to a Portuguese audience in Portugal and in other countries as Brazil or others, so we can teach more people about sustainability. And just as a side note, I am the Portuguese Alex voice on these videos, and I believe that they are very useful, and we're very happy to have this partnership. Alex, there's no better person than you to explain why you do it and what you do. The screen is yours.
Thank you, Sergio, and thank you, Marta, as well. I'm very happy and very excited to be part of this panel and to be able to share the kind of work that I do. And thank you, Sergio, for working on all those translations of the videos in Portuguese. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. In a nutshell, I'm a civil engineer who started an internet startup during the bubble in 2000. And in 2006, I realized that there was a lot more going on in the world than what I knew or had been paying attention to. And I got into sustainability thanks to a friend. And I think I realized I wanted to become part of the solution and not the problem anymore. I wanted to work in sustainability and didn't know anything about it. So I did this master's program in Sweden. It's called Masters in Strategic Leadership Towards Sustainability. And if anybody is interested in learning more about sustainability, this is a fantastic program. I think it's not running this year, but it should start running again next year. I highly recommend it. And then I worked as a sustainability advisor with an international nonprofit. And over the past 7 years, I focus more on illustration and communicating sustainability. And I do that in 2 different ways, mostly through what I call whiteboard animation, that's speed drawing videos, and cartoons. So this is an example of one cartoon I did on climate change a few years ago. It's actually an illustration of a quote that I really like from a Canadian climate scientist whose name is Katharine Hayhoe. And she says climate change is like gravity. Essentially, laws of nature don't care whether you believe in them or not. They're just there and they do what they do. So I've done a lot more cartoons on sustainability, climate change, carbon footprint, carbon offset related topics. Those are 4 examples. The one in the bottom left is also a quote from Katharine Hayhoe, actually. She says the best time to stop our carbon emissions is today. It's like smoking. And most of my activity, even more than cartoons, is those animation videos. So the last one, as Sergio mentioned, is on carbon footprint. And this is just a little clip. It's actually the beginning of the video. I thought I would try and include that as a video in the presentation to give you a feel for what it looks like. If you want to check that out on YouTube or on the website. You're probably already familiar with carbon footprint, so I'm not going to go into the details of it, but essentially it comes from the concept of ecological footprint. The ecological footprint being the amount of land and water area that we need as human beings to produce the resources we use and to absorb our waste. So that's, things like fish and farming and wood and all those resources. And carbon footprint is a part of that. It's essentially when the resource is carbon, we call that our carbon footprint. And worldwide, it's about half, even 60% of our ecological footprint is our carbon footprint. That's how much carbon we use to sustain our way of life right now. So I'm not going to get into more details about that, but essentially you can calculate your carbon footprint, the carbon footprint of a country, the carbon footprint of a city, of a person, of a product, all of those things. And there's a lot of interesting things about carbon footprint. One of them, just if I had to highlight one, so there are many ways you can reduce your carbon footprint. In the video, there's a number 1, which is carbon offsets. You can look up more if you're interested. The second one is what I call addressing the root causes. So you already know all that. You can have better insulation in your house, use less electricity. The electricity you use, you can use from renewable sources. You can bike instead of driving. If you drive, you can drive an electric vehicle, provided that the electricity where you live is not produced by fossil fuel, obviously. You can fly less, eat less meat, all of those things. But one that I think is interesting because we never talk about it, and it totally surprised me when I put the video together, is the carbon footprint of our investments. Why? Because when you give your money to financial institution to invest it, most of the time they invest it in fossil fuel. And when I calculated my carbon footprint, I actually realized that 20% of it was my investment. And I don't even have that many investment. I just have a mortgage and a car insurance. So anyway, that's just a little nugget that I thought was interesting and that is highlighted in the video. And just to build a little bit on what Sergio was talking about, I don't necessarily agree with everything that Bill Gates says. He says a lot of things these days, but his latest book is certainly interesting. And this idea that we need to become a carbon neutral economy by 2050 is, I think, a very interesting objective. And if we focused on that, if we say that we want our economic activity to produce net zero carbon through things like, energy, how we produce cement, plastic, all the food systems, transportation, cooling and heating, the built environment, and all of those things. In the framework, the sustainability framework that I use, that I learned in Sweden, we use something that we call backcasting. And essentially, it's a strategic way of saying, I am in 2050. What if to achieve what I want to achieve in 2050, what do I need to do today? It's like looking back at the past from the future to decide the actions that we need to take today. And it's something that we do naturally, individually, like when you're 17 years old and you want to be a lawyer, you have this course of action that you want to take to become a lawyer. But as a society, we don't plan towards sustainability in a strategic way, in the same way. And I think this is a very interesting concept that we could use more. And we can even connect that with check and this idea of checkmate. Like if we define what checkmate is for being carbon neutral in 2050, we don't need to know what the board is going to look like in 2050. We don't need to know all the details of all the technologies that will be available and all of those things. What we need to know is the definition of success. And like, in chess, you need the king of the opponent to not be able to move anymore. And every action that we take turn after turn to achieve this objective is addressed by the definition of success. And you reassess your strategy after each turn, depending on what the opponent has done. And it's the same with sustainability and climate change. So this is a very powerful tool for strategic planning towards being carbon neutral in 2050. But to conclude on that, I produced, 20, 25 of those whiteboard animation videos that are all available on this website, Sustainability Illustrated, and the YouTube channel. And they are being translated or have been translated into Portuguese, thanks to Planeteers. So huge kudos to them. They've done a huge amount of work. It's a lot of work to translate so many videos into a different language. And they will be available very soon. So I encourage all of you to have a look at that if that's of interest to you.
Thank you, Alex. And I reinforce that it was a pleasure to be your Portuguese voice for such important content. They're really, really educational and easy to understand some complex ideas. Next, I would like to introduce our other guest, João Pedro Gouveia. Thank you for being here with us, João. João is an environmental engineer with a PhD in climate change and sustainable development policies from Nova School of Science and Technology in Portugal. He works there as an invited assistant researcher at the Center of Environmental and Sustainability Research. He's a senior research fellow for energy systems at Project Drawdown, originally from USA, and one of the founders and board member of DERA, Drawdown Europe Research Association. His work on the area of sustainable energy transitions, smart and sustainable cities, climate mitigation, and adaptation strategies. Building energy efficiency is crucial, and João has been following this path with such motivational and inspirational and practical. That's the most important word in the middle of this if we want to achieve our goals. I would like to pass the screen to you, João, so you can explain more about that crucial work you've been doing.
Thank you, Sergio and Marta, and also Alex, for setting the scene also for my presentation. And thank you again for the invitation. So I'll talk you today about our work at Project Drawdown. But first, I would like to bring to your attention this word. So probably some of you have not heard about it, and you should know it. It's drawdown. So drawdown is a new way of thinking and acting in the face of global warming. It's really an objective for a future we all want, a future where reversing global warming is indeed possible. So I'll briefly present the work that we have done, starting back in 2016, where we identified and assessed 100 solutions to reverse global warming with the objective of achieving drawdown. So what's drawdown? So drawdown is the point in time, so in the future, when the levels of greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere stop climbing and then start to decline. So it's the turnover point where we start halting climate change. And for this, we set the mission to help the world to stop global warming, achieving drawdown as quickly, safely, and equitably as possible. We started, as I said, 5-6 years ago, with a question on phase one. What if? So is drawdown possible with the solutions that exist today? What's the framework? What are the most relevant solutions? What do we need to do? So Project Drawdown was founded with the idea of countering the prevailing sentiment around climate change, so of really portraying the population and the countries as victims. But this is really a phase of opportunity, a challenge, understanding and optimism. So we wanted to bring this message, trying to understand that this is not happening against us, it's happening for us. So we are members and agents of change. So of course, this positive thinking is not enough, and the message alone is not enough. So that's why, more than a communications organization, it's really a living research program where we worked with dozens of researchers, now probably more than 100 researchers across the globe with diverse backgrounds, more than 30 countries represented, more than half have PhDs, but we bring together also people coming from companies, from different types of businesses, architecture or policy or forestry. So really a diverse team, where we try to understand, of course, how to solve this problem. So how do we start the process? So because seeing the current situation in many countries, it seemed really a difficult objective. However, from our understanding, the humanity already knows what to do. And that's why you can see here the 100 solutions that we identified and that are clearly linked to the Sustainable Development Goals. So here below on my slide, you can see an onion diagram that we have developed last year, where we link drawdown solutions to the different SDGs, and you see the multiple links. And we maybe can bring this on the discussion later, but this was an interesting work that we have done. So it's more on understanding which solutions are available, because we already have them. Most of the technologies and practices, we know how to use them. It's a matter of scaling and to develop in different contexts. So here in this figure, you can see the global perspective around emissions. So on the left, you see the sources of emissions. So you see industry representing 21%, or food, agriculture, and land use 24%, and electricity 25%. So this is on the left side. But then we have the natural sinks. And what we do, and our assessment at Project Drawdown, was really to understand how to reduce the sources, maintaining the sinks, and maybe fostering even the sinks of CO2. So, of course, this scheme is different in different world regions, of course, but this is a global perspective of the problem. So at Project Drawdown, we mapped and modeled solutions, mainly with three ideas. So replacing fossil fuels by renewable energy, reduction of consumption through energy efficiency and technology efficiency and behavioral changes, and also to sequester carbon, increase the sequestration rate of carbon in plants and in the soil. So more or less around these three key principles: reducing sources, of course, bringing emissions to zero, supporting sinks, uplifting nature's carbon cycle, and then, of course, one more cross-cutting on improving society, fostering equality for all. So with this combination and these three mechanisms, we set the scene for the analysis in multiple sectors. So we have electricity, we have food and agriculture and land use, we have, of course, industry, transportation, buildings, health and education, land sinks, coastal and ocean sinks, and engineered sinks. So on the first approach, back in 2017, with our first publication, we understood this 100 solutions. So 80 of them were already available, where we modeled and conducted research with numbers. And then there were 20 upcoming attractions, coming solutions that might be relevant to accelerate the pathway of transition. In our latest publication in 2020, we looked more on this perspective of sources and sinks, not exactly the sectors itself and the solutions within the sector, but on this perspective of the role of the sources and sinks to this objective. Here you can see how we get there. So it's the top 20 solutions in one of our scenarios. You see the ones with biggest potential. So it's an update of the previous version. Maybe you can have a look for a couple of seconds, but you see this list is eclectic. So there is a diversity of sectors. You see that by the colors as well. So you can see in orange, for example, wind turbines. You see health and education in brown. You have plant-rich diets or reducing food waste. This is important to see that there is a diversity of solutions that are really impactful at multiple scales. But on the axis, and this bar, is the potential for reduction or avoidance of greenhouse gases until 2050. So the role of each solution between 2020 and 2050. So looking deeper to specific solutions, we see, for example, reduction of food waste as number one solution. As you may be aware, we waste a third of all food that is produced in the world. So it's downstream, it's upstream, and if all this waste of food was a sector, it would emit 8% of the global emissions, just following China and then the US. So it would be really a key player. That's why it's on number one. Number two on the ranking, health and education. So around the world, nearly 62 million girls are denied the right to attend school. There is a lack of family planning in different regions of the world. So empowering girls and young children to go to school and understand better how to plan their family and to enter the job market will really be a good asset also for climate change and emissions avoidance, as well as bringing more health and education to the global population. Another example, really important, plant-rich diet. So here we are not talking about not eating meat, for example, is more on a healthy diet. We are not prescribing diets at the global scale, but it's more on this assessment that a healthy diet is better for all. So it's a combination of more vegetables, of course, bringing this at a global consumer perspective. Ranking 6 on the last update, onshore wind turbines, so one of the most significant technologies for this transformation, energy transformation, with an impact of 47 gigatons of reduced avoided CO2 while replacing this technology by the existing ones, fossil fuels. So it's part of the important solutions. So we improved clean cook stoves, ranking number 9. So you see the solutions are applicable at different locations of the world, not only for developing countries or developed countries. That's an important part. So ranking number 10, you see distributed solar photovoltaics. And when you think about it, maybe it's on an urbanized setting in developed countries. But this is really an important solution also for developing countries, islands, where you see that the solutions are applicable all over the world. And these solutions, of course, have cascading benefits. So, for example, this family, it's a straw island in the Lake Titicaca, received this first solar panel. And this is improving their health. They were burning fossil fuels, kerosene in a lamp, and so on. So this is improving their well-being as well, not only a matter of integrating renewable energy, but with multiple cascading benefits. Another important solution, it's insulation. So a reduction of energy needs for cooling and heating. So it's number 16 on the ranking. Public transit. It's important to, let's say, make mass transit sexy, improve the service quality, encourage urban density. And that's the questions we are trying to understand now. But this is important to see how a technology or a practice is scaled and compared with the others. So that's what we have done at Project Drawdown, bringing comparison apples to apples. So the first time anyone has done that across the different sectors. So, of course, also important forest protection, and I'm bringing you here only a couple of examples, as you might imagine. So protecting forests is really resulting in a decrease of global emissions coming from deforestation. So this is also critical. Efficient ocean shipping, the way we buy things on eBay and so on. So this is really critical to bring more efficient on the systems, of course, and buying more local than bringing stuff from China or somewhere else. Coastal wetland restoration. So this links the first assessments of ocean and coastland solutions. Now we are delving deeper on ocean solutions at Project Drawdown. And last year review, we only had this one and improving the coastal wetland. Here you can see the drawdown system. So it's a matter of understanding that we have a series of technologies. We don't have a silver bullet, the one that we really can rely on, a specific one that can solve our problem. Of course, looking to this figure, you can see the interlinks, even the colors around the links with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. But also you can see that probably, I'd say 10, 12 solutions can help us to make the half of the way. So you have seen around the top 10, but we need them all because they are applied at different contexts in different world regions. So it's not only a matter of identifying one or two solutions. So that's why we have to support all. So overall, we identified almost 1,000 gigatons that can be avoided in the next 30 years with increased adoption of these solutions, with important, of course, initial costs, but total savings really making the case. So 4 times the return on investment of the money we spend on these solutions at the global scale. And these results were published back in 2017. Were synthesized in the Drawdown, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. It's a New York Times bestseller. It's on the top of several Amazon lists. And this was, in the recent years, translated to multiple languages. So we have French, Dutch, German, Mandarin, Portuguese from Brazil. So in different locations where we try to bring the message. Last year, on the latest climate solutions research insights, the Drawdown review, Climate Solutions for a New Decade, a report available online on our website. So we now started, let's say, the phase 2, how to, right? So how can humanity get on track to create the future we want? And on that idea, we bring 3 questions or 3 ideas. So collect and more and better data, applying this to regional contexts. We are studying specifically the US. We're exploring, of course, Europe, And we're bringing also stories of solutions. So best practices, what people are doing around the world to implement solutions. So, of course, important on our research part, improving the modeling, integration of solutions, more sectors being assessed. Now we are looking deeper also on the potential solutions to reduce methane emissions, as I mentioned, also ocean solutions, and then to distribute, democratize research and modeling efforts to achieve this collective impact. So it's not only a matter of focusing on the US or so, it's bringing different groups of people to work together to this transformation. So indeed, it's a matter of understanding that drawdown is possible. It will not cost that much compared to the return on investment. And we also, a message I would like to convey here, it's implementing these solutions is a matter of changing the way we do businesses, changing the system from exploitation of resources to a new normal where we have restoration of nature and regeneration as a new objective. So it's really to rethink the global objectives, going beyond the carbon neutrality in 2050. So it's a path to sustainability, moving forward to regeneration. And by the way, we change and reverse global warming. So it's a byproduct of an improved economic and welfare system. Thank you.
Thank you, João. Thank you so much for this very interesting and eye-opening also content that is very important to us.
I also want to thank both presentations that were brilliant, different of course, but very provocative in this context that we were talking about. I think I would start with João. The European Union 2030 targets seem to be gaining momentum with the presentation of the Green Deal strategy, and namely raising the bar to a 55% reduction in greenhouse emissions. What I would like you to highlight is what kind of work developed by Drawdown in Europe has been made, and how does it play versus the European Union strategy?
Thank you, Marta, for the question. Well, Drawdown Europe Research Association, so DERA, was created back in 2019, in early 2019, and is really a research association that is regionalizing the drawdown models and approach to the European contexts. So DERA has started in the past working with, was funded by IT Climate Kick, and we worked together with some European convening partners to build this first approach to the European setting. So what we know is one of the greatest barriers to climate change is really the asymmetry of access to systematic or contextualized approaches and knowledge and innovation and skills for development. So what we foster is this science behind human-made global warming is solid. So we promote this part of the research, of course, and really to improve the situation, which is really difficult with the absence of tools. So under this context, what DERA has been doing as part of the Global Drawdown Research Collaborative, that's important to stress, and DERA is kind of the flagship effort to regionalize and contextualize project drawdown research. We're trying to bring innovative tools for supporting the implementation of drawdown solutions at European scale and better understanding even the context and the rankings at different locations, so European country level and even specific regions. So the idea of DERA and what we have been doing kind of slowly, let's say, is to capitalize on the deep expertise that and commitment that the European Green Deal based has done. So the ideas and all this also on the foundation of open science and open data. And their vision is to create a regional solutions-driven knowledge-based platform. So online platform where everybody can collaborate and then connecting to the global scale of project drawdown. So we want to foster the links with universities, European universities and cities, really collaborating in this assessment of relevant solutions and promoting drawdown online platform for supporting and empowering business and investors, governments, citizens to take action. That's the idea.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, João.
There was something stressed that was common on both presentations, that is education. It kind of sounds like it's kind of the base of everything else that we can build over that. And my question to Alex is trying to simplify, to educate people these complex topics of sustainability. What has been your experience with Sustainability Illustrated? What kind of audience do you feel is the one that has been following the most this kind of content? And what has been the feedback you've been getting from that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's been a learning curve. Before I answer that, I want to say I have it and it's fantastic. And if you don't have it, you should, because I look at it every day. It's packed with super cool information and numbers. And I want to make more videos on that just to help communicate it. Super interesting. I think most of the audience a good chunk of the audience on the YouTube channel, I shouldn't say most because I don't know the number exactly, but there's a lot of students. And I think there's a lot of students because there's a lot of teachers who send their students to YouTube to learn. And it's also because of the nature of the videos I create. I have a lot of videos that are one concept explained in 6-7 minutes, like carbon footprint, ecological footprint, the sustainable development goals, that type of thing. And because it's a short format and people can watch it several times, I think it's very well suited to students. But there's also a lot of sustainability practitioners who use them during their trainings or their workshops or as support material for their work in general. I wanted to add, because every time we talk about education, I remember the defense of my thesis in Sweden. That was 14 years ago now. And we were so much about education, and it was about making music festivals sustainable. And we're like, we're going to educate the audience, and the artists can educate the audience. And someone asked us at the end if education was going to solve it, because in their experience, education didn't lead to behavioral change. And that question totally got us gobsmacked. And we're like, oh, right. Yeah. If you educate people, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. And I think that's the very important part about education. It's not because you tell people that climate change is terrible and it's a disaster and they should do those 10 things that they're going to do that. Unfortunately, it doesn't translate that easily. So we need a lot more tools. So yeah, it's necessary, but not sufficient.
I have this feeling, correct me if I'm wrong, but that even with these formats, it can be really useful for some kind of ecosystems. For example, the ecosystem of nests, for innovation, for startups, even for SMEs that want to start to walk on this journey. Do you feel the same way that there are some businesses or people that are starting their own projects that could benefit from this content that you're creating?
Yeah, of course. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to keep them short and engaging because because it's a topic that can be very heavy at times. The more you work in this and the more you're exposed to it, the more you realize how dramatic it can be. And it's easy for people to fall into the depression stage and go, well, I'm just one person, I can't do it. So making it fun and engaging and easy to understand helps a lot. That's one of the things that I love about the project Drawdown, the book as well, is because it's 1 or 2 pages per project and you get a snapshot and you don't have to, have a PhD to understand those things. So it helps a lot. And although those videos are short, I still try to keep them very dense with information and valuable information, not too superficial things that, are not going to make a big difference. I'm trying to be fairly provocative. And actually, talking about provocation, there's something I was thinking about earlier. The number one thing in the project Drawdown is reducing food waste. And I think this is a great segue to the importance of legislation in addition to education and the rest of it. Because being from France, I still keep an eye on what's going on there. And in 2017, France put a legislation in place to make it illegal for supermarket to throw food away. That's simple. On February 2017, they said supermarkets cannot do that anymore. We're now in 2021 in Canada and the USA. There's not even a shadow of that type of legislation coming up. So I think this is critical. Businesses are important. Individuals are important, but legislation is super, super important because it can turn things around overnight.
Can I add something there? I think what Alex was mentioning is really on point because it's not only a matter of creating more awareness. That is critical. We have seen that if the technologies are available, we really need people to engage with them also. But the regulation, the regulatory part and the financing system, how to fund this transition. So it's not easy. Sometimes it seems easy. We hear a lot of increase of renewable energy, but that's only a portion of the change we need to make. So we are in need to change a deep transformation of infrastructure, how we have planned the cities, how we have built our buildings. So as an example, in Portugal, 70% of the building stock is inefficient.
Yeah.
So how to turn this, how to make this turnover of the infrastructure. And this requires, of course, regulation. It requires vision, long-term vision of governments, of cities, of planners, and it requires a lot of funding. For example, we see good examples, of course, of integration of renewable energy, but at a global scale, renewable energy for electricity generation only covered the increase of demand. It's not replacing exactly what we have from coal, oil, and natural gas. It's still only on the top of the cake. So we need to foster this deep transformation. Only when we hear, maybe at European context, we hear a lot about electric vehicles. But how much time do we need to reverse this? So the structure of the cars, of the diesel and petrol cars we have to make it to electric vehicles, that's a deep discussion. But overall, I would say that we need to tackle all fronts. So we really need to avoid inefficiencies in the system. So it's system losses across energy, across the production of food, across the waste we do, on the energy, on the water we use, on the resources we extract, and then at the end we are just inefficient. So that's an important part of the process also, to understand all the sectors, and that's why I think Project Drawdown brought this to light, kind of the importance of multiple sectors, not only how we produce electricity, but the foods, the way on health and education as well, the importance of land and protect the ecosystems.
Absolutely.
João, in Drawdown, you present solutions and you show the potential for the global reduction of emissions. 80 of 100 solutions seem to be in place to be applied. We wonder if they are really ready. I mean, economically viable currently?
It's important to understand that this was the question I put on my presentation. What if it's possible, right? So it's a global impact assessment of different solutions to understand how the increased adoption of them might be relevant up to 2050. So overall, our research showed that there is financial benefits as well as, of course, the environmental benefits. But it's important to understand the regional contexts. And that's why we are making this phase for decentralized research systems and understanding the role of each technology and practice in different contexts. But nevertheless, we see really good examples out there. So solar PV integration or winds. So in the last 66 years, probably they have reduced 50%. They are 50% cheaper or even higher. So we see a lot of development also on battery storage. We see important information coming from the coal power plants being retired in Portugal just this year, one of them, and will be next year the other. So at the European level, we hear a lot of discussions of decreasing the use of coal power plants. So this brings potential, for example, on the energy side of renewable energies really being on the forefront of the market, being cost effective, being relevant to be integrated with no subsidies of the government, for example. But of course, it's important to stress the regional differences. So of course, some of the technologies and practice we showed are really important to scale, but the economic benefits might be different if you look to Africa or Southeast Asia or the European context, that's for sure.
One of the things that also we discussed here a lot is the SDGs. The SDGs were such, I think I can say, revolutionary initiative in a way that you have colors, you have symbols, you have goals that anywhere in the world can understand and can talk to each other about them. It's kind of a universal language to talk about sustainability. But there's always been someone saying that they're not enough, or there are others that are saying that they're too ambitious and we're not getting there. Question is for both, but also Alex, as I've been working in this partnership for the videos, the question is, do you feel that the SDGs can have an important role in this transformational process? And there's two dimensions here, is to business leaders and for citizens, or just for one of those, or for none? What's your opinion on that?
That's a good and tricky question. Thank you for asking it.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I think there's a lot to unpack about the SDGs, so I won't be able to do that right now, obviously, but there's several thoughts that come to mind. One is that it's one of the only thing that we have that is built on a consensus worldwide. So that's really good. Like we don't have very many things like that everybody has worked on and said, okay, we agree on doing that. So I think that's a great starting point. When I wrote the script, it took me not 2 years in practice, but it took me 2 years between the day I decided to do a video on the SDGs and the day I published it, because it's not very easy to present 17 things without being boring in 6 or 7 minutes. So I think one of the weaknesses of the SDGs is that there's so many of them. It's hard to, when you have 3, 4, 5 of something, you can get a mental model of them. When you have 17 of something, I don't think any of us right now can list the 17 SDGs without mistake all at once. Like, it's really challenging from that perspective. But yeah, I think they cover everything. They cover all the social aspects, which a lot of the time when sustainability practitioners or climate change people and all that, they're very much focused on the ecological side of things for good reasons, because we have a lot of ecological and environmental challenges to address. But the SDGs address everything. That's a great thing about them as well. I think one thing that needs to happen with the SDGs is the Sustainable Development Goals. Shouldn't use the acronym every time. Is they need to be, and some people have started doing that, like Future Fit for Business has started doing that, but I think they need to be unpacked or well put together for SMEs. I don't think the average SME right now is having an easy time using and addressing the Sustainable Development Goals in their everyday work. Well, especially after a year of pandemic, it's even, they have other priorities. But I think that's something, I know some people are working on that, and there could be more work. So, your little corner store, all the medium-sized enterprises around us have a better grip on this and know how to use them and how to address them on a daily basis, as opposed to this vague UN 2030 thing that they don't really know what to do with. And they don't have the time to figure it out a lot of the time.
What is understandable, and that linking what Alex was mentioning, is the difficulty to bring together the different type of players to understand the SDGs. So the framework doesn't really, and that's why that's difficult, doesn't clearly stipulate how existing technologies or practices really can help us to achieve the goals. That's maybe the difficulty. Of course, they set ambitious objectives. And that's why, thinking of this and sensing also the comprehensive overview of Project Drawdown solutions, we try to map and link both of them. So people at different agency levels could understand what can really do and how that can link to an SDG. But what was obvious for us is that the solutions really having these multiple co-benefits by itself and the cascading effects also are interlinked with the different SDGs. So if I'm promoting for investing, for example, on solar PV in, let's say, in Africa, I'm not only supporting SDG 7 on cleaner and affordable energy, but I'm also the one linking to health, to reduce poverty. So it's linking with the SDG 1, SDG 2, depending on where it's, for example, a solar PV panel might be put, can also be helping the healthier cities, improving cleaner water and cleaner air. So you see that this framework is really interlinked as well. And that's why also at Project Drawdown, we have made that publication that I showed with the onion figure, because it really shows the interlinks and how implementing one, we can be benefiting and supporting several other sustainable development goals and specific objectives. And just to say that we frame this research under the Global SDGs Encyclopedia, but located on the SDG 17 on partnerships for the goals. So not focusing specifically in one, but showing that this engagement of different agents and actors and stakeholders at different scales really, and creating this global collaborative, can support the SDGs and objectives for 2030 and long-term pathways for 2050 as well.
I would like to build on that, because since we're talking about poverty and the United Nations, and the whole thing was about carbon footprint, I wanted to maybe connect the dots a little bit with all this. And that's something that I found out when I did the research for my carbon footprint video as well, and that I did at the end of it. It's every year the United Nations publish this UN gap report. And in 2020, there's a lot of information in this report, but one piece of information that I thought was interesting is that 10% of the population is producing 50% of the greenhouse gas emissions. And this is the symbol of the holistic system that we have to address and the holistic problem that we have to solve. There's a lot of people who don't contribute to that at all. And our industry in the more developed countries have a bigger impact. I think it's important to remember, because in our everyday life, as a part of this 10%, maybe for a lot of us here, it's easy to forget that there's a lot of people who don't contribute as much, and that's in the end it's the system that has to be changed. And I think that was also a reminder for me that even more than driving an electric vehicle and this and that, voting is super important because of the legislation I was talking about earlier, and because of this systemic issue as well, like deciding who is going to change those rules that are part of the problem right now.
There is just one more question that I would like to address you both, and that has something to do with something João addressed. It was the regeneration techniques, which he mentioned. And so since we are talking here about a program addressing solutions for tourism, still being a topic very, very emerging, the regenerative tourism strategies. And we have already seen some countries working on this, like New Zealand, which has been addressing and remodeling their strategy in tourism model, which is a vision where the tourists and the population go together with a strong focus on preservation and recovery of nature, of people, of community, of economy. I know you are not a specialist on tourism, of course, but how do you see these kinds of visions applying to Portugal?
Well, I can start. So I think these visions and, luckily, some colleagues at Nova University of Lisbon have been working with the Portuguese tourism to set also sustainability practices and some sessions around energy efficiency and other practices. But I see these visions really will be the future. So because after this crisis, even it's a combination of things. So there needs to be kind of a rebirth, or at least picking up where they were on the tourism sector, because they need to find this pathway to sustainability. I think people will in the future, and even understanding this whole pandemic situation, people will be demanding more sustainable practices. And when we think about that at the global scale, we try to find also locations where we can be better connected with nature, so more sustainability practices. So people will choose, and tourists will choose the front runners. And I think Portugal is on that path. I've heard about a recent initiative of the sustainable tourism in Portugal, funded by the environmental funds. So it's an example of motivation and awareness of the sector in Portugal. So I think this really overlaps, and the tourism in Portugal is well suited for that transformation.
I don't think I'm familiar enough with tourism in Portugal. I mean, I think tourism, like a lot of other industries, has a great challenge ahead of itself, mostly because of transportation. I mean, there's a lot of, I think we can also reinvent tourism and have a way of doing tourism that doesn't necessarily involve traveling across the world and all that. And I remember when I was doing my thesis on making a rock festival sustainable, that's one of the things that we had to address, because one of the big issues with festivals is that people come from far away, and that's one of the greatest impact. So I think, like many industries, the tourism industry will have to reinvent itself a little bit, whether we're able to fly electric planes or not. I worked with companies from the aerospace industry, and some of them really embrace the challenge. Like they work for companies that have been pioneers for 100 years, and they don't want to disappear into flames for, like, no pun intended, because of a crisis that is like 10% of the length of the life of their industry. So they're like, we need to find a way to do that. And I think some people in the tourism industry might be like that too. They might think that there's a great challenge and that it might be super inspiring to some people and maybe totally overwhelming for others.
Well, thank you. I think you were very inspiring at this program. Thank you very much.
I just have to say that we had a lot of topics to discuss here. If we could, unfortunately, we don't have the time. But I believe that we addressed really important things here, especially because when we're talking about tourism, I always say this: tourism and sustainability work with the same two variables, that is people and territory, right? So I believe that there's a lot on this synergy that can be built on this concept with a lot of the tools that you brought. And I want to highlight one more thing, that is that we'll have the translation of this work of sustainability illustrated, Sustentabilidade Ilustrada, for companies in Portugal or citizens that want to understand more about this. It will be available soon as another tool to understand this. And I just have to say thank you all for the work you do. And thank you Marta, for being an amazing partner for this program. And I hope to see you soon.